This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. We're coming to you live from Manila in Thailand. Hello, Faye.
Hello, Alma, and welcome everyone live here in Thailand. This is Faye Barte bringing you the latest news around the ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. The Philippines is ready to facilitate emergency repatriation of Filipinos from Israel amid the heaviest fighting between Israel forces and Palestinian militants, according to Malacanang.
President Rodrigo Duterte has downgraded the quarantine classification in the National Capital Region Plus, or NCR Plus, and other areas to a more relaxed General Community Quarantine, GCQ, from a more restrictive Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine.
And the lucrative fishing industry has come under fire for subjecting its migrant workforce to forced labor and other abuses in Taiwan, contrasting with the government's promotion of the democratic island as a regional human rights beacon. Now, those who work on its vessels, mostly poor migrants from the Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam, paint a grim picture of punishing work hours, dock pay, months without family contact, regular beatings, and even death at sea.
Our EBC correspondent Audrey's Liarenas takes us to a resort in Malaysia called Tadong Hills.
First, the Philippines is ready to facilitate emergency repatriation of Filipinos from Israel. This amid the heaviest fighting between Israeli forces and Palestinian militants, according to Malacanang today. In a virtual presser, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the Philippine Embassy in Israel and the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, are expert in ensuring the safety of Filipinos amid the latest escalation of violence in Gaza and Jerusalem. Take a look.
Dahil alam niyo pong sanay na ang ating mga embahada at ang ating OWA sa mga pumuputok na gulo sa iba't ibang parte ng daigdig kung saan meron tayong mga kababayan. Mayorya sa kanila ay nagtatrabaho bilang OFW. Alam na po ng ating embahada doon kung ano mga posibleng mga pangyayari. So hinahanda na po yung posibleng repatriation, hinahanda at binibigyan na po sila ng warning na kung po pwede po ay yun nga po, mag-ingat dahil dito sa mga pag-iinit na mga pangyayari dyan sa Israel at sa occupied territory. No? At ang gobyerno naman po natin, kung talagang kakailanganin, siyempre po, susunduin natin ating mga kababayan kung talagang kinakailangan at kung gusto po talaga nila. Siyempre po, ang naging posisyon na ng DFA, sana po malutas sa mapapayapang paraan itong tensyon na nangyayari po dyan sa gitnang silangan.
Now, no Filipino casualties have been reported amid the escalating exchange of airstrikes and rocket fires between Israel and Palestinian militant group Hamas, according to the Department of Foreign Affairs on Wednesday. Israel bombarded Gaza with artillery and airstrikes on Friday in response to a new barrage of rocket fire from the Hamas-run enclave in an intensification of a conflict that has now claimed more than 100 Palestinian lives. Days of deadly violence have seen Israeli soldiers massing on the edge of the territory, although the army stressed there had been no ground incursion despite an earlier statement that troops were carrying out an attack in the Gaza Strip. Israeli security forces have also been scrambled to contain deadly riots between Jews and Arabs, and projectiles have been fired from Lebanon. Images early Friday showed large balls of flame turning the night sky orange in densely packed Gaza, while rockets were seen tracing through the air towards Israel. The UN said the Security Council would meet on Sunday to address the conflict.
Now in the Philippines, President Rodrigo Duterte has downgraded the quarantine classification in the National Capital Region, or the NCR Plus, and other areas to a more relaxed General Community Quarantine GCQ from a more restrictive Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine, or MECQ. President Duterte decided to ease quarantine protocols in Metro Manila, Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna, and Rizal, also known as NCR Plus, upon the recommendation of the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, who was present during a meeting with President Duterte at Malacanang Palace, said NCR Plus will be placed under GCQ with heightened restrictions from May 15 to May 31. Apart from NCR Plus, the quarantine classification in Abra was also downgraded from MECQ to GCQ. The MECQ status was, however, retained in the city of Santiago, in Isabela, Zamboanga City, Quirino, and Ifugao. And the rest of the country remains under the least restrictive modified GCQ for the whole month of May. And once GCQ with heightened restrictions is implemented in NCR, only essential travel into out of the NCR Plus will be allowed. Interzonal travel from NCR Plus areas, except those conducted by authorized persons outside residents, will remain prohibited in GCQ areas with heightened restrictions. And the public transportation shall remain operational at such capacities and protocols in accordance with the Department of Transportation guidelines, while the use of active transportation shall be promoted. Only individuals aged 18 to 65 can leave their homes, while NCR Plus is under stricter GCQ. Entertainment venues like bars, concert halls, and theaters, recreational venues such as internet cafes, billiards halls, and arcades, amusement parks, fairs, playgrounds, kiddie rides, indoor sports and venues, and indoor tourist attractions and venues for meetings, conferences, and exhibitions will not be allowed in NCR Plus. Religious gatherings and gatherings for necrological services, wakes, interment, and funerals for those who died of causes other than COVID-19 in NCR Plus will be allowed up to 10% of the venue capacity. Indoor and outdoor dine-in services would be allowed in Metro Manila and its 4 neighboring provinces. Also, indoor dine-in services in NCR Plus shall be at 20% venue or seating capacity, while outdoor or alfresco dining shall be at 50% venue or seating capacity.
And staying in the country, President Duterte has extended the prohibition of entry of travelers from India and 4 other nations that are part of the Indian subcontinent until May 31st. That, according to Malacanang, announcing that today, the extended travel ban covers India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, according to presidential spokesperson Harry Roque in a press statement. The Philippines initially imposed travel restrictions on passengers from India and 4 other countries until May 14 to prevent the entry of the new double mutant COVID-19 variant that's responsible for New Delhi's worst coronavirus outbreak. The COVID-19 variant, first detected in India, carries 2 mutations, the E484Q and the L425R. And experts say the E484Q mutation is similar to the E484K mutation or the escape mutation, which helps the virus gets past the body's immune system, while the L452R is found to be an efficient spreader of the virus. Now, the Philippines has reported 2 cases of India's double mutant B1617 variant. One of the 2 COVID patients is a 37-year-old overseas Filipino worker from Oman, while the other one is a 58-year-old OFW from the United Arab Emirates, and they have already recovered from the disease. Roque said the government has also decided to expand the coverage of the travel ban by including Oman and UAE. He also said passengers from Oman and UAE who are already in transit and arrive before May 15 will not be subject to the travel restrictions. However, they are required to undergo stricter quarantine and testing protocols by observing a 14-day facility-based quarantine period upon arrival and ensuring that they get a negative RT-PCR result.
In other news, Hong Kong scrapped a plan to make coronavirus vaccines mandatory for foreign domestic workers after the proposal sparked an outcry and diplomatic tussle. But authorities ordered all foreign helpers to undergo another round of mandatory testing, triggering renewed criticism from the Philippines. Health officials plan to roll out mandatory inoculations for the 370,000 domestic workers in the city, mostly poorly paid women from the Philippines and Indonesia. And those wanting to apply for work visas or renew their current ones would need to show they had received 2 doses. But on Tuesday, City Leader Carrie Lam announced a U-turn. And I quote, the government has decided not to request mandatory vaccination when helpers renew their contracts, end of quote. And adding the decision had been made after meetings with officials from the Philippines and Indonesia. Philippine Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin had previously said the initial proposal smacked of discrimination. Hong Kong health officials said domestic workers were high risk because they often work with the elderly and meet in parks on Sundays. Usually, they are 1 day off a week.
To Thailand now, where recent COVID-19 outbreaks in the country highlight the dangers posed by overcrowded prisons. Yesterday, Thailand's Department of Corrections announced that nearly 3,000 inmates at 2 prisons in the capital had tested positive for the coronavirus. Joining us live is Gretchen Kusadsad from our EBC Thailand Bureau. Hello, Gretchen.
Hello, Alma. Good afternoon. Yes, you are correct. In Thailand, reported largest ever spike in coronavirus infection Thursday, with more than half coming from 2 Bangkok prisons. These prisons are prominent because this is where democracy activists are and have been detained. Alarm bells sounded this week when an activist at the forefront of Thailand's democracy movement announced she had tested positive for COVID-19 5 days after she was released on bail from Bangkok jail. Corrections Department official Wirakit Harnparipan confirmed that another activist held at the Bangkok jail, Panupong Mike Jadnok, had also tested positive and had been sent to the prison hospital. The young student leader was detained on multiple royal defamation charges for his role in the protest movement last year that included calls to reform the once unassailable monarchy. Wirakit said Bangkok's 2 prisons had tested 100% of their inmates, but he did not specify when the testing period began. Panupong's lawyer Nora Set Nganungtum said he would file a bail request via conference or video conferencing for the student leader who suffers from asthma. One of the activists, or Panupong, is among more than 80 democracy activists facing charges of lèse-majesty for leading last year's protest movement. One of the activists involved, Somyut Pruksakhsimsok, who was released on bail in late April, said there was no transparency on the virus behind the bars. The kingdom is battling a 3rd wave of the virus that has forced the government to impose restrictions on movement, rules on mask wearing, and also close public spaces. On Thursday, Thailand reported more than 4,000 infections, or 4,800 infections, its highest single-day jump yet, which included over 2,800 cases found in 2 prisons in the capital. according to Tawizing Visanayotin, a spokesman for Thailand's COVID-19 task force. On April 25, the Correction Department said that only 10 new cases had been found at Bangkok Remand Prison, but cases jumped to 1,794 this week after the protest leaders raised the alarm. That is the report here in Bangkok, Thailand. Alma, back to you.
Thank you very much, Gretchen. Looking forward to more updates coming from Thailand. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And this is Gretchen Kusasa from Bangkok, Thailand. We live in interesting times.
From Thailand, we go to Taiwan's lucrative fishing industry, which has come under fire for subjecting its migrant workforce to forced labor and other abuses, contrasting with the government's promotion of the democratic island as a regional human rights beacon. Now, those who work on its vessels, mostly poor migrants from the Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam, paint a grim picture of punishing work hours, docked pay, months without family contact, regular beatings, and even death at sea. Take a look.
Tinatadyakan po, binabatukan pag ganun kasi hindi naman po matiis yung antok, sir. Minsan pag nagtatrabaho po, naantok na, mabagal ng gumalaw. Ayaw po ng mga opisyal yun, babatuhin ka po kung anong makita sa'yo. At yun po ay naranasan ko rin na nasapok ako nung bago ako dahil ako po ay 18 years old pa lang noon. Siyempre, isip na bata pa po eh. Ang pinakamahirap na naranasan at nangyari sa amin doon ng mga fisherman ay yung una, wala kaming komunikasyon sa pamilya. Kulang ang tulog namin. At yung akala namin pag-uwi namin ng Pilipinas, marami kaming pera na baon. Yung pala, naloko lang rin kami ng agency namin.
现在目前在台湾，最大量的这个引进的外劳是印尼跟菲律宾的渔工居多。那由于他们的工作场域啊，因为比较跟对外比较没有办法联系，所以他们在海上的工作劳动条件啊，或者是他们的生活环境啊，这些都是非常糟糕的这个情况。
Now, last year, the United States added fish caught by Taiwan's deep waters or water fleets to its list of goods produced by forced labor for the first time. It was an embarrassing moment for Taiwan, an island that shook off autocracy and markets itself as one of the region's most progressive democracies. Recent steps include becoming the first place in Asia to legalize gay marriage, a historic apology by President Tsai Ing-wen to the island's indigenous communities in an ongoing campaign to address abuses of the martial law era. But there has been little headway in tackling labor abuses, especially within the $3 billion fishing sector. Migrant fishermen interviewed by AFP said they routinely had to work up to 21 hours a day, enduring verbal, physical abuse, as well as zero communication with the outside world. When pay finally arrived, it was often lower than agencies had promised. Now, in a survey of Indonesian fishermen published last year, the Environmental Justice Foundation found a quarter reported physical abuse on Taiwanese longline vessels. 82% worked excessive overtime hours, and 92% had wages withheld. The Seafood Working Group, a coalition of NGOs that monitors abuses with global fishing fleets, estimates some 23,000 people work on Taiwan's deepwater vessels. Earlier this year, it recommended Taiwan be downgraded in Washington's annual human trafficking report, citing wage deductions, forced labor, murder, and the disappearance at sea of migrant fisheries. Taiwan's fishery agency said it doesn't allow forced labor or human trafficking and was working to amend relevant regulations in a timely manner. And the agency said it was planning to submit an action plan to the government but could not give a date. Last week, the government's own watchdog, known as the Control U1, said the Fisheries Department and other ministries had taken no concrete measures to address fishing abuses despite being aware of them.
Now, a Japanese journalist held in Myanmar prison over accusations of spreading fake news will be released, and charges against him withdrawn, according to state media on Thursday. Yuki Kitazumi is one of at least 80 reporters arrested during the junta's crackdown on anti-coup protests. Freelance reporter Kitazumi was detained in April and held in Yangon's insane prison, which is notorious for holding political prisoners. But state media said Thursday the charges against him would be dropped after Japan had asked for his early release. And I quote, although he violated the law in order to reconcile with Japan and improve our relationship, charges against him will be withdrawn and he will be released in line with Japan's request. End of quote. And this is according to state broadcaster MRTV. And an earlier investigation found that Kitazumi supported the protest, it added. Kitazumi's detention in April was the second time he had been held since the coup in February, and he was beaten up and briefly taken into custody during a crackdown on protesters but was later released. A Japanese embassy spokesman told AFP last month that Kitazumi was arrested due to the suspicion of releasing fake news.
A former Myanmar beauty queen has joined ethnic rebels to take up arms against the country's military junta, posting photos of herself with an assault rifle. Myanmar has been in chaos and its economy paralyzed since the military seized power on February 1, ousting civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Hitar Hitet represented Myanmar in the first Miss Grand International Beauty Pageant in Thailand in 2013, competing against 60 contenders in swimsuit and national costume rounds. Fast forward 8 years and glitz and glamour is a far cry from the jungle of Myanmar's border regions controlled by ethnic armed groups. The 32-year-old now gymnastics instructor posted a picture to her Facebook page this week dressed in black combat fatigues and carrying an assault rifle. The 32-year-old, this on her Facebook page this week, she said, the time has come to fight back, she wrote on her Facebook page. Whether you hold a weapon, pen, keyboard, or donate money to the pro-democracy movement, everyone must do their bit for the revolution to succeed. Tuesday marked 100 days since the putsch, but the deadly violence did not deter crowds in Yangon taking to the streets, demanding a return to democracy. The coup ended the country's decade-long experiment with democracy after half a century of military rule. More than 780 civilians have died as security forces moved to quash mass protests with a brutal crackdown, and they have shot demonstrators in the streets, arrested people in night raids, locked up journalists, and ordered internet outages. Thousands of people from urban parts of Myanmar have fled to border regions, including many with links to Suu Kyi's political party and others facing arrest for their involvement in the protest movement and labor strikes.
Now here in Thailand, a severely ill hunger-striking Thai democracy activist released from prison vowed Wednesday to keep fighting for reform to the country's monarchy, defying his bail conditions. Parit Chiwarak, who goes by the nickname Penguin, was held in pre-trial detention for nearly 100 days for multiple royal defamation charges. He is one of several protest leaders hit with such charges after massive demonstrations calling for changes to the kingdom's powerful royal family. And to protest his detention, Penguin had gone on a hunger strike for 57 days, losing 12 kilograms or 26 pounds before he was transferred to a hospital in late April to monitor his deteriorating health. And Penguin remained defiant on Wednesday in a message posted to social media platform Line. I quote, "For me, the fight for monarchy reform will continue," end of quote, adding that the call does not dishonor the institution. Criticism of the monarchy remains taboo due to harsh lèse-majesty laws that carry penalties of up to 15 years in jail per charge. Penguin faces 20 lèse-majesty charges for his prominent role in last year's demonstrations against the Thai government, which at its peak drew tens of thousands to the streets.
And back here in the country, Dagupan City has recorded its highest heat index so far this year, hitting 52 degrees Celsius. Pagasa said it surpassed the 51 degrees Celsius heat index that was registered also in Dagupan City on May 8. A heat index between 41 and 54 is under what the Pagasa considers as danger level due to the high likelihood of heat cramps and heat exhaustion. Pagasa attributed the warm and humid weather conditions to the prevalence of the easterlies over Luzon and Visayas. The Provincial Health Office has reminded Pangasinenses to stay indoors or in shaded areas, remain well hydrated, and avoid strenuous activities amid dangerously high heat index being experienced in that province. Faye and I will be back right after this break.
This portion is brought to you by Security Bank.
Susunod sa Kes Saya Saya.
Hello mga barangay! Kumusta kayo?
Mag-video call na kami ni Carding Babes ko. Nagtawalan ng kuryente.
Tuloy ang quarantine bubbles sa ating mga lavables. Walang kukontra, walang pipigil, at walang pwedeng humadlang sa akin dahil I'm living on a jet plane. Maka-eyeball ko lang ang may babes kong si Carding.
Hello! Welcome sa aking first time online selling dito sa Katakutan Hardware.
At di rin papipigil si Kapitan sa first online hardware selling. Pero iba yata ang hanap ng kanyang mga potential buyers.
Naitinda ba kayong brief na polka dots?
At kahit anong gawin nyo, sisiguruhin ni Bebeng na magugupit niya ang mahabang kuko niya sa paa. Masakit man ito.
Sumaya tayong lahat.
Kesaya Saya, tuwing linggo, alas 6:30 ng gabi, dito lang sa Net 25.
Welcome back to the program. An elderly French Vietnamese woman has reacted after failing in her bid to sue Monsanto and other makers of the toxic chemical agent Orange over its use by the US as a weapon during the Vietnam War. Let's take a look.
C'est vrai que quand j'ai reçu le message qu'on m'a envoyé tout d'abord, alors c'est vrai que j'ai eu comme un choc dans le cœur parce que je n'y m'attendais pas. Je me suis préparée déjà pour le pire, mais telle décision, ça m'a abasourdi. Dans ce jugement, ce qui me choque le plus, c'est que le jury a pris presque exactement les arguments, les termes des avocats de la partie adverse. Moi, j'ai confiance en la justice française. J'ai toujours confiance, mais je suis en colère quand même contre la conclusion d'hier. Ne vous inquiétez pas, j'irai jusqu'au bout et je survivrai jusqu'à la fin. Je crois que notre combat contre les crimes de l'agent orange et le combat contre l'écocide vont aller ensemble.
Ok, non, je pense que c'est bon là.
The 79-year-old complainant who covered the 1955 to 1975 war as a reporter but has lived in France for the past 3 decades also accused the companies of environmental damage. But the court in the Paris suburb of Évry ruled that the firms had been acting on the orders of and on behalf of the United States and therefore enjoyed immunity from prosecution under international law, which prevents one country from judging the actions of another. Campaign groups estimate that 4 million people in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia were exposed to the 76 million liters or 20 million gallons of Agent Orange sprayed by U.S. forces to destroy ground cover and food sources in its battle with communist North Vietnamese troops between 1962 and 1971. Vietnam blames it for severe birth defects in 150,000 children, but so far only military veterans from the United States, Australia, and Korea have won compensation for the after effects of the highly toxic chemical. Tran Tu Nga suffers from type 2 diabetes and an extremely rare insulin allergy, which she linked to exposure to Agent Orange. In another report, at least 7 people were killed and 1 reported missing after a landslide at an Indonesian gold mine, authorities said on Tuesday. Torrential rain triggered a landslide on Monday, inundating the mine with mud mixed with stones and debris in South Solok Regency, West Sumatra, said the local emergency department head Fikri, who, like many Indonesians, goes by one name. In a statement, the department said at least 7 killed and 1 is missing. Rescuers managed to save 9 survivors from the mud and were combing the area to find the missing miner. And the disaster occurred just 2 weeks after another landslide hit the Chinese-backed Batang Toru hydropower project in North Sumatra, killing 10 people. And 3 people were still missing when rescuers ended their search last week.
In other news, police in the city-state said a Singaporean couple have been arrested over the death of a newborn baby found dumped in the trash in Taiwan 2 years ago. Now, Taiwan had placed the couple from Singapore on its most wanted list on suspicion of murder after they allegedly left the baby girl in the recycling bin in the capital, Taipei. A recycling company employee later found the body with the placenta and umbilical cord still attached, wrapped in a garbage bag. Singaporean police said they arrested a man and a woman, both aged 25, on April 28 for their suspected involvement in the death of the newborn baby in Taiwan in February of 2019. In a statement late Tuesday, police said they launched an investigation after receiving a request for assistance from the authorities on the island. They didn't name the couple, but Taiwan prosecutors previously told AFP that Lee Heng-shun, and Ivan Kai-pei were being sought for suspected murder and abandonment. Taiwanese media has reported the Singaporean couple were believed to have dumped the girl's body 7 days after they arrived in Taiwan, and then they flew back to the city-state on the same day. It was unclear whether the island has sought the couple's extradition, but it sometimes faces difficulties in pressing such requests. This is because many countries do not treat it as a sovereign nation, especially those with close links to China, which regards the island as part of its territory. Singapore has good ties with both Taiwan and China.
Another 1 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID vaccines will be arriving in the Philippines this month. During the public address of President Rodrigo Duterte Thursday night, Chief Implementer.
First quarter, the vaccine is coming on trickle. Ngayon po, Mr. President, they are coming.
The Chief Implementer of the government's national policy on COVID-19, Carlito G. Galvez Jr., disclosed the vaccine's Global Access or COVAX facility increased the country's allocation of Pfizer vaccine from 1.2 million to 2.2 million. And the decision of the COVAX facility comes after government has successfully deployed the 193,050 doses of Pfizer vaccines to qualified local government units or LGU earlier this week. Compared with other COVID-19 vaccines, the jabs from Pfizer is much harder to distribute since it requires to be stored minus 80 degrees Celsius to retain its efficacy. To address the issue, the government limited the distribution of the Pfizer vaccines in cities with necessary cold storage facility. Mr. Galvez said aside from the Pfizer vaccines, he said the COVAX facility will also be sending almost 2 million additional AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine by next month.
And staying here in the country, the Department of Foreign Affairs filed a fresh diplomatic protest over the continued presence of 287 Chinese maritime militia vessels anchored in the West Philippine Sea. At DFA Phil, fired diplomatic protest, tweeted Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro L. Locsin Jr., who had earlier promised to file a new protest for every day that Beijing doesn't pull out its boats from the West Philippine Sea. Locsin, however, admonished the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea for not following protocol when its chairman, National Security Advisor Hermogenes Esperan Jr., issued a statement on Wednesday announcing the presence of 287 Chinese vessels in the nation's territorial waters without informing the Department of Foreign Affairs. First, he said NTF-WPS will explain to me why it made a press release and didn't inform DFA first. This he also said on Twitter. The NTF-WPS reported on Wednesday that at least 287 China vessels were spotted in the West Philippine Sea based on a maritime patrol conducted last May 4. The Philippines has filed numerous diplomatic protests, at least 83 so far, under the Duterte administration over the lingering presence of Chinese vessels in the area, most notably in the vicinity of Julian, Felipe Reef, where a little over 200 were spotted in early March. To Malaysia now, where the former Malaysian leader Najib Razak, who has been convicted over the mammoth 1MDB scandal, is in trouble with the law again, this time for breaking coronavirus rules in a restaurant. He was fined 3,000 ringgit or $730 for failing to register at the eatery or have his temperature taken, according to police. Now, this came after footage circulated on social media showing the ex-prime minister flouting the rules in March at a Kuala Lumpur restaurant that sells a traditional chicken and rice dish. While Najib still denies any involvement in the 1MDB fraud, over which he has been sentenced to 12 years in jail, he was quick to admit his misdemeanor at the eatery. The 67-year-old, who remains free on bail while he appeals the 1MDB conviction, used the incident to highlight other cases in which politicians allegedly broke the rules. Now, these include an incident when ministers allegedly traveled illegally to another part of the country to attend a wedding. The restaurant owner was also fined 10,000 ringgit for failing to ensure Najib followed the regulations.
More updates around ASEAN region after this short break.
Paano ba nakakatulong ang mga bangko sa pagninegosyo sa panahon ng pandemya? Ano nga ba ang serbisyo ng mga bangko na maaaring gamitin ng MSMEs para mapalago ang kanilang mga negosyo sa gitna ng krisis sa COVID? In this episode, we will talk about cash management system, which now has become a must-have platform for businesses to help track their finances and ensure their business goals remain on track.
The most important for us would be the bank that would have the most comprehensive products, which will serve our needs.
When you get into cash management, those are two super basic stuff that you would need. The government payments and at least man lang the fund transfers, which is basically PesoNet and InstaPay. So kahit konti o marami kang pera, kailangan mong bayad ng supplier.
Pag-uusapan din natin ang DigiBanker for small to medium business ng Security Bank in this episode of Open for Business.
Welcome back to the program. Staying in the Philippines, it will remain among the top recipients of remittances in the Asia-Pacific region in 2020, despite the significant reduction of overseas Filipino workers or OFW deployment during the year. In a comprehensive report on world remittances, the World Bank said the Philippines is the second largest remittance recipient in the Asia-Pacific, second only to China. The World Bank said OFW remittances defied earlier predictions of shrinking flows due to the pandemic. And the World Bank said, I quote, a key factor behind this resilience was the growth by 5.5% of inflows from the United States, by far the largest source of remittances to the Philippines by almost 40% in 2020. Positive growth in remittances from the United States and Asia helped to mostly offset declines from the Middle East and Europe, which fell by 10.6% and 10.8% respectively in 2020. The decline from the Middle East reflects the absence of formal safety nets available to migrant workers in the face of the pandemic and the large repatriation of overseas Filipino workers, and it added. This is in contrast to the projected 7.9% fall in Asia-Pacific remittances in 2020. The World Bank noted that the country's strong remittance number also represents a bucking of the trend given the fall in deployment of Filipino migrant workers last year.
Philippine monetary officials on Wednesday kept the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP key policy rate steady as inflation is now expected to stay within target this and next year and domestic growth to post improvements. During the virtual briefing streamed through the BSP's Facebook page, BSP Governor Benjamin Diokno said the policy-making monetary board decided to maintain the key rates. Take a look.
The latest inflation forecasts indicate that inflation is likely to settle within the target range in 2021 and 2022. Inflation is now projected to track a slightly lower path in 2021 to average near the upper end of the target band as price pressures on food commodities are abating with improved weather conditions, the impact of Executive Orders number 128 and 133 series of 2021, and the implementation of direct non-monetary interventions to alleviate supply constraints. Meanwhile, the inflation forecast for 2022 is seen to remain near the midpoint of the target, but has increased slightly owing in part to rising international crude oil prices. The risks to the inflation outlook are also broadly balanced. The Monetary Board emphasizes that the timely implementation of the approved non-monetary measures will be crucial in mitigating further supply-side pressures on meat prices and inflation. At the same time, the Monetary Board expects the domestic economy to continue to recover in the coming months, aided by the government's targeted fiscal interventions and the sustained rollout of its vaccination program. Improved prospects overseas should also support the outlook for domestic economic activity. However, the recent surge in COVID-19 infections and the resulting measures to contain it continue to temper market confidence and pose substantial downward risk to domestic demand. On balance, the expected path of inflation and downside risk to domestic economic growth warrant keeping monetary policy settings steady. The Monetary Board believes that sustained support for domestic demand remains a priority for monetary policy, especially as risk aversion continues to hamper credit activity despite liquidity in the financial system.
Now, Jollibee Foods Corporation on Thursday said it opened its first flagship store in the state of Maryland in the United States last month, making it the 12th state where the brand is present. The restaurant in Westfield Wheaton Mall is 30 minutes away from Washington, D.C., and the capital of the U.S., and home to the White House. The company said the opening allows the brand to attract Gen Pop, or customers who are unfamiliar with the brand but are seeking out new food experiences, as well as tourists who come to the area for its iconic landmarks. As part of the brand's safety measures and in compliance with COVID-19 guidelines, consumers are prohibited from crowding into stores, and the company implemented the call and pickup order process. Westfield Wheaton marks the brand's first location in the state of Maryland, its 49th store in the U.S. The company said it will open in more locations throughout the year, including Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York City.
COVID jab maker BioNTech said Monday it would build a Southeast Asia headquarters and manufacturing site in Singapore to produce hundreds of millions of mRNA-based vaccines per year. Speaking in a press conference alongside Singapore's Minister of Trade and Industry, CEO Ogur Sahin said the facility would not help increase global vaccine supply over the next year. Let's find out why.
We have to be clear that starting now building manufacturing in Singapore will not help us in the next 12 months with regard to the global supply. The global supply can only be addressed by really increasing the existing production capacities. Yeah, we did that, and we continue to do that in the next 12 months. For your question, yes, it's in the range of hundreds of millions of dollars, US dollars, and yes, of course, establishing a manufacturing hub in Singapore also means that a certain percentage will go to Singapore itself.
Now, construction of the site will start this year and it could become operational by 2023. The Singapore production site will be the German company's first mRNA manufacturing facility outside Europe and will have an estimated capacity of several hundred million doses of such vaccines. Its partner, Pfizer, operates production sites in the US as well as in Belgium. Messenger RNA genetic technology trains the body to reproduce spike proteins similar to that found on the coronavirus. When exposed to the real virus later, the body recognizes the spike proteins and is now able to fight them off. U.S. pharmaceutical firm Moderna uses the same technology for its vaccine. Coronavirus has wrought havoc across the world, but for Thailand's sea gypsies, it has brought welcome respite from the threat of mass tourism. Since the pandemic began, life has been easier. For Sanan Changnam and his people, there's an abundance of fish to eat, and real estate projects on their ancestral land in the tourist hotspot of Phuket have come to a standstill. Take a look.
มีพวกอุทยานพวกนักท่องเที่ยวด้วยทำให้เราไม่มีการจะทำหรือว่ามันบีบพวกเราแล้วก็มาหากินก็แคบ
Oh, มีความกระทบเพราะว่าเขาจะสมมติว่าเส้นทางที่เราจะมาทำพิธีกรรมนี้เขาจะปิดไม่ให้เข้าแล้วก็ที่ท่าเทียบเรือที่เราเทียบเรืออยู่ประจำเนี่ยเขาบอกว่าเขาจะปิดแล้วจะไม่ให้เข้าเนี่ยมันมีความกระทบต่อชุมชนมีมากครับ
เราเคยคุยกับชาวเลบางคนนะคะแล้วเขาก็บอกว่า
ชาวบ้านยืนยันว่าบรรพบุรุษเราอยู่มาตั้งหลายร้อยปีแล้วเป็นผู้เบิกของเกาะภูเก็ตแล้วจะมีนายทุนมาขับไล่เนี่ยชาวบ้านก็ไม่ยอมเพราะว่าเราอยู่มาก่อน
Now, finally, in our news, our EBC correspondent Audrey Llarenas take us to a resort in Malaysia called Tadom Hills. Audrey?
As we all know, most parts of Malaysia are still under MCO due to COVID-19. In this time of pandemic, it is important that we take care of our mental health as well. So, if you are looking for a new place to relax and unwind, Tadom Hills is the way to go. Located in the state of Selangor, Tadom Hill Resort is the right place for those who want to take a break looking for outdoor activities. This bamboo-inspired resort is about an hour travel from Kuala Lumpur. The resort offers a day pass which costs around 20 to 25 RM, depending if it's a weekday or a weekend. It will cost cheaper as well if you're in a group. This includes free use of their gazebo, which is on a first-come, first-served basis, water activities, and outdoor games. They also offer barbecue pit rental for 65 RM, including a bag of charcoal. You can pre-order their barbecue platter or you can bring your own food as long as it's pork-free. One of their outdoor activities is the go-kart, which will be enjoyed surely by the kids and also those who are kids at heart. They offer 10-minute ride for 25 RM and 25-minute ride for 40 RM. If you are to more adventure type of activity, you may opt to try their ATV ride. They offer a 2.5-kilometer ride for 43 to 48 RM and 4.5-kilometer ride for 80 to 88 RM, depending if weekday or weekend, to show the beauty of Tadom Hill. A tour guide will lead you during the ride. Please bear in mind that drivers are not allowed to take picture or video for safety purposes. But don't be sad. The passenger can take the picture or video instead. If you are alone, a bunk can take picture for you. He knows that we all want to take good picture of that memorable experience, so he will stop to the best places to take picture of us. And that's not all. Tadom Hill Resort also offers a zipline, which they called as Flying Fox, and archery as well. You can also enjoy to swim in the Tadom Hill Lake. Life vest is a mandatory for all the visitors that will go to the lake for safety purposes. There are also bamboo rafts that you can ride on. So, what are you waiting for? Once the MCO is lifted, pack your bags and visit Tadom Hill Resort. Take a break and relax for a while. But don't forget to follow strictly the SOP wherever you go. This is Audrey Llarenas from EBC Malaysia. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Audrey. I miss going out.
That is a good spot. After this pandemic, we can definitely go there.
True. Can't wait. Thank you for keeping me company today, Faye.
Thank you also, Alma, and thank you to all who watch ASEAN in Focus. Stay updated as we always bring the latest updates around Southeast Asian nation. This is Faye Barte from your EBC Thailand Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
And we'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you back next week, rather. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.